Imagine having a minor ankle injury lead to a chronic, debilitating, extremely painful condition that no one seems to have any answers for. That was exactly the experience of our guest today. Today, you're going to be learning all about complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS. And you're going to get to hear it from someone who not only went through it personally, but overcame it and now helps others also heal their chronic pain. Harry Macansh is a speaker and wellness coach who recovered from the considered incurable complex regional pain syndrome and now helps others do the same. During more than half a decade, Harry has spent upwards of $250,000 in the US and Australia, acquiring an arsenal of knowledge and modalities he now affordably delivers to others from the stage and in one-on-one coaching. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Unweaving Chronic Pain Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Andrea Moore, founder of the Whole Self Integration Method, and I am here to take you from a life that is wrought with pain, where you don't even get to live where you wake up every morning having no idea what your pain is going to be like, and if you can even do anything enjoyable, to a life that you can actually enjoy, where you can do the things that bring you joy, where you get to discover what brings you joy maybe for the first time in your life, where you get to open back up and feel like you are actually living the one ridiculous, crazy life you were put on earth to live. If you want to learn more about how to get started on that process, sign up for a free Energy Up-Level consult call today. The link is in the show notes. Welcome, Harry. I'm so excited to have you on here. How are you doing today?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation and hopefully adding some value for your audience. And as I mentioned, providing that free resource at the end for them as well.
Yes. And for everybody who you probably heard a little bit in the intro, but Harry is a CRPS specialist, and this is something we haven't talked about specifically on this podcast. So I'm really excited for him to bring in his knowledge and his wisdom and his lived experience to you. So Harry, why don't you tell people briefly, because I know we'll pull out details and go into it more in depth, about your story and what got you to where you are today.
For sure. Yeah, I suppose instead of defining what CRPS is, it's maybe easier to do that through narrative and really just explain it that way, because it is a bit of a wild beast in general. So for me, it was in 2017 and I was playing a game of sport with my friends and basically just rolled my ankle, and it was meant to be a 6-week syndesmosis, high ankle sprain, return to play, nothing major. And then I started getting this tingling and this burning, temperature changes, color changes, and the symptoms started to slowly spread up my leg to the point where my whole leg felt like it was on fire. And that sort of kept going for a number of months, and I had no idea what was going on. And then it also started spreading to the other leg as well. And I got this mirroring effect where I was experiencing the same pain in the right foot where it had started in the left. And that's where you really start to think you're going crazy. And it doesn't help when you're not getting anything from any medical practitioners, because they don't equally have any idea of what's going on. And basically it's just a matter of hitting that with medication and hitting that with nerve blocks. And over the course of a couple of years, I was really just in this state of flux where I didn't have any answers. And at the same time, the condition was getting worse. And I think to give people a bit of context, when you go and Google CRPS online, which stands for complex regional pain syndrome, there's two things that really define it, and it's largely considered the most painful neurological condition that you can endure, and the second part of that is it's largely considered to be incurable. So the cocktail of those two things, the hopelessness along with the severity of the pain, gives it the nickname suicide disease often, because it is quite an unbearable condition. And that was certainly my experience with it. I think if we go, fast forward a couple of years and really just pushing through that and trying to just survive day by day, it wasn't until I got sent this news article, and it was about this clinic in America that was really treating this and a couple of other central nervous system chronic pain conditions almost exclusively. And they were running something like an 80% success rate, which was completely unheard of in this field. And so a couple of weeks later, I was on the plane over to the US, and to everybody's surprise that I speak to in America, it was in the northwest of Arkansas. And
I was wondering what clinic this is.
And and basically, I got over there and the place was pretty miraculous. They were really treating the foundation of what sort of creates this condition in the first place, which is really dysregulation in the autonomic nervous system, and addressing the body as a whole and bringing that back into a state of balance. And it was really unique that they were treating conditions like EDS, POTS, fibro, CRPS, but virtually doing it all in the same manner and doing it by addressing the central nervous system and bringing that into regulation. And what I was seeing over there was, people that had been in wheelchairs for the best part of 15 to 20 years, and in the space of 3 or 4 months would be back, not just walking, but sometimes running with full function. And total transformation. And that was the same for me. So, struggling to walk, and then within 3 months was running and sprinting and doing all the things. So that was the first part of the journey, and really discovering what CRPS was, and then how to work through it.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And just for listeners, how long was the progression from the ankle roll to like the full on symptoms? Like, what was that like?
Probably early stages. It kicked in about 2 weeks after the initial injury. I got put into a moon boot, and I lost some feeling. The temperature sort of changed, and then trying to rehabilitate it as normal. I think it was probably within a month or 6 weeks, I was getting really significant burning and pain in that leg. And I think the initial response was like, oh, well, it's just going to resolve itself, so we'll just leave it, or we'll just put you on some Lyrica, we'll put you on some neuropathic pain meds, and it'll resolve itself. And that was I just stayed in that state of flux for a number of months, just thinking
I'm always just so fascinating, right? Like, what kicks something into CRPS? And actually, before I ask that question, can you tell people a little bit more? Okay, so it's like, let's go ahead and define it. So CRPS, you've already said, stands for complex regional pain syndrome. And it used to be called RSD.
RSD, yeah.
Some people might know it as that as well.
Exactly, yeah. That's probably been 15, 20 years ago. I think it was probably that got changed. And I think the characteristics, generally speaking, and whenever you talk about a syndrome, it generally encompasses a host of symptoms, is getting an injury generally to a peripheral area, hand or foot is most likely, and that the pain and the symptoms far exceed the actual the response of the initial injury, and it's really just the brain going into overdrive and perceiving there to be a threat when really there isn't anything that's significant, and that just perpetuates. And the foundation of that, it's like the brain needs to be in a overly hypervigilant state in the first place, and then once you have this injury, it starts perceiving threat. And I think, from my understanding, when we talk about the peripheral areas and why it happens there, is that it's the furthest away from the brain, and it can maybe get a little bit confused around what that sort of looks like and if there is actually a threat or not, particularly when it's not in its normal regulated state. And I think the example of that is sometimes given with phantom limb pain, where the limb can be cut off, but the brain is still perceiving there to be threat and pain in that area where nothing exists.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always known it to be associated with what you described, like the temperature changes. Sometimes you see color changes, like a lot of like the tingling and burning, and even it can be like swelling and things like that. Are those always characteristics, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I would say from a diagnostic perspective within the current medical paradigm, that's the way that they define it. If you're looking for a legal definition, or you were trying to, at one stage I was going down the avenue of potentially getting recuperated for, for the injury and getting, going down the legal route.
Mm-hmm.
And they would need that definition from a visibility perspective. But there's been times with my condition when I've had it where I didn't necessarily need, have so many visible symptoms, but you can still have the really intense pain and the significant nerve pain without that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think you said something so interesting about this clinic, which I want to ask a bunch of questions about too, and all the things that you did there, that they were treating CRPS in similar ways as POTS and fibromyalgia and EDS and all these other ones, which is what I have found to be very effective as well. And that while it can be helpful to have a clear diagnostic for easy ways to communicate, I often find with many of these types of chronic, complex pain diagnoses, it becomes less important and it's more about the symptoms and then really getting to the underlying cause, because the treatment actually ends up having a lot of overlap.
Yeah, there's a couple of things on that. I think early on, particularly getting a diagnosis is such a big thing for people, just for them to feel like they're not going crazy or that they're not that anomaly, to be able to I kind of know as a first point of call. And really beyond that, I don't see so much value in having the diagnosis, because a couple of things, we're going to treat it similarly. Well, within the framework that I utilize with my clients, we're going to treat it similarly regardless of what the actual symptomatology is, because we're dealing with the underlying conditions that have created that in the first place, and the symptoms can manifest differently in different people, but that's not so much the important part. The second part of that is really people can attach their identity to their diagnosis, and they get very stuck in the state of this is me, I am this, I am a CRPS sufferer, and that identity piece can be hard to shake because for myself, I'm a very significance-driven person. So even I wasn't able to achieve in other areas of my life when I got sick, and it was almost my significance got attached to my illness or my diagnosis, and then that was kind of my identity for a while. And that's the other piece for me, where it's let's see if we can just let go of that a little bit.
Yes. I think that's so important. Yeah, I find the diagnosis, especially when, and I'm so curious, right? If we lived in a totally different world with a very different medical system, I don't think the need for the diagnosis would be there if people were treated with empathy and their symptoms were taken seriously, and people they came in and they were understood. But I think and I think you can speak to this from a personal level, you're going from doctor to doctor, people might be not believing you, not taking you seriously. To have that label is oh, finally. So it's it's a step that's almost becomes necessary on the healing journey, but it's then you got to take the next step and move past it.
Yeah, you find that, and getting bounced around, it's they all know a lot about a little, but they know little about a lot, in a sense. Yes. And that can be so frustrating. And then when you do finally get the person that does know, because that's their area of specialty, then you cling on to that. And I think I find it fascinating when you learn more about these chronic illnesses, and you learn that there's a build-up of pressure over a long period of time, through a whole lot of experiences in someone's life, and it becomes a perfect storm for this to be the foundation of the illness to present itself. And then the approach to try to treat it is dealing with one receptor or one mechanism, one method of treatment, one nerve block, whatever that is. And it's a total oversimplification of the treatment. And that really, there's a total paradigm shift for me coming to the States and seeing a different approach that I was totally unaware of.
Yeah. And so let's go into that approach a little bit. So it's what was this clinic doing differently, and I'd love to hear both, were there things that this clinic is doing that you don't integrate with yours, or have you adopted a very similar way of treating? Tell me a little bit, because obviously I know you now work with people with, is it just CRPS or any chronic pain?
Yeah, typically any chronic pain, because we're talking, I would say, more related to autonomic nervous system dysfunction or those types of conditions that we listed off earlier, because that's what I'm most familiar with. But if I'll talk into what the clinic sort of did, and then I'll talk into maybe a little bit more about what I do specifically. So the clinic itself, it's called the Spiro Clinic in Northwest Arkansas, and it was founded by a South African chiropractor who moved over there, 20 or 30 years ago. And basically, Katinka Vandermeer is her name, and she describes her first patient that she ever saw with CRPS, where she trialed basically a manual vagus nerve stimulation technique on that patient. And over the course of a 12-week period, she basically did every day. She would do multiple of these vagus nerve stimulations on this person. And for anyone who doesn't understand the vagus nerve, it's the longest nerve in the body that connects up all the organs, and basically is responsible for those non-conscious functions in the body, and largely responsible for inflammation. So she was stimulating this nerve and basically just bringing the nervous system back into a state of calm. And over the course of that 12 weeks, she got this man into remission, and he is still in remission today, 12 years later. And that was the thing that kicked it off. And over the course of 10 or 12 years, she's added a whole bunch of technology, a whole bunch of additional modalities, a whole bunch of other supports, and continues to do so. But the very foundation of it is really stimulating the vagus nerve, bringing that autonomic nervous system back into a state of calm, allowing that rest and digest state to take over, and really built on the foundation of the body wants to be in a state of calm, and it wants to be in a state of health. And it's just about removing the blocks to that, as opposed to, when you're experiencing these conditions, you feel like your body's eating you alive, or that it wants to get back at you, or it's some sort of, there's something going violently wrong, or there's something wrong with you, when really there's just something in the way, and we just have to work to clear that out. And that's the foundation of the clinic. But when I was there, we were spending the best part of 7 hours a day, 4 days a week, at the clinic, and doing, I think, on a rotation of 13 or 14 different modalities over the time, and it was very intensive. And that's how they generate such consistent and such quick, turnarounds, and they can get people that are very, very, very stuck and have been for a long number of years, and get them and turn it around in a short time frame because of the intensity of the environment. So I suppose if I then talk about what I do with people, and a lot of that has been distilling elements of that, and really working on the vagus nerve and calming the central nervous system as the foundation to get people, at least out of, or reducing that state of fight or flight to the point where they can exist a little better right now. The thing that I didn't unravel, and we can go into later, that really kept tripping me up, was the fact that I hadn't dealt with the initial conditions that had created the CRPS in the first place. And that is really around the emotional side of things, the behavioral side of things, the way that I was living, identity issues, all of these things. And I think more so of the general hypervigilance in the nervous system that stemmed from some events earlier in my life that I wasn't really aware of, because I was that person that didn't really have any major traumas. I don't have any of those big T's. But you realize, having gone through and combing through that over time, that there's all these things that build up the pressure. And for me now, that was the thing that was pivotal in creating long-term transformation. And I was actually able to get myself back into remission purely using these principles at a later time when I'd fallen out of it. And now knowing that, it's really distilling the power of that emotional elements, and also combining that with everything that I did learn over there, which is so much, and then providing that for people in a practical and also an affordable way.
Oh, that's so fascinating, because that was actually kind of led into one of my questions, is that I've always been a little skeptical of some of this like vagal nerve stimulation stuff, solely because, and I always tell people, I'm like, clearly I see a biased set of people, right? Like, they're coming to me because other things didn't work. And what I have found for a lot of my clients, and what I talk about quite a bit, is that a lot of times if you're trying to regulate your system, which, one of those methods could be vagal nerve stimulation, which I don't particularly use for this reason, is that for the clients whose system doesn't feel safe being safe, it doesn't work. It like actually creates almost more of a tension, and they almost get like a kickback anxiety response because it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's like trying to calm yourself while you're sitting in the middle of a busy highway. Like the body's like, what are you doing? We can't be calm. There's threats coming at us. And so I'll have these people who like tried all these different techniques, and it's like it's not working. And what we find is this underlying piece of, oh, it's not safe to be safe in your body. And when we address that, all of a sudden then they can go and bring in these other tools a whole lot more successfully. So I think it sounds like you had a lot of success at this clinic, and then things kind of caught back up to you, and then you're
Yeah, and
able
I think
to, yeah, it's just fascinating to hear that. And I also want to put in like when you're in such a state of pain and things are so intense, having something to help bring your system down is probably also so incredibly useful.
yeah, for sure. And I think if I think within the context of the clinic, like when people get there, some of them are in this state where they've got seizures, they've got full body tremors, they've got digestive system shut down, they're really on the brink, it's really last chance saloon. And I get what you're saying. And I think when I observe it there, sometimes the response to the stimulation can go either way. A lot of the time it is bringing people into calm, but then if they're really worked up, it can work the system up even more. When they've got that within that controlled context, they've got so many other treatments and supports around that to be able to work with that. I see it, it's very different to trying to do it yourself and then having to deal with the responses
doing it at home, watching a YouTube video. Yeah, no, I can see where if you're doing in that type of like controlled, intensive environment, that sounds much more supportive.
And there's some really easy and simple ways to do it in a manner that's not going to overflood the system as well. Breathwork's obviously a good one. I was using a lot of cold exposure as a way to turn on that system again, which is not particularly comfortable, but it proved incredibly effective. And even things like humming and really just calming the system that way. It's not going to overstimulate what's already present. So that there's a lot of elements that I still use and I still believe strongly in that sense, just as a way to bring a little more resolution and calm to the present moment for people, so they can kind of get a little clearer headspace to be able to work through the things that we'd want to work through. Because the next phase, when we talk about really going back, and I trained in a technique called the Dr. Espen method. So I would describe him as similar to probably like an Australian version of Joe Dispenza, where he deals with a lot of quantum technology and dealing with the energetics and purely with the emotion of things. And when I'm working with someone and doing like a timeline therapy or working back through time and really going to these traumatic events and reframing them and working through them, it's an intense experience. So the more present and the more calm you can be going into that, the more transformation you're going to be able to have, because you're really going to allow yourself to be with that experience and transform it. So I see a lot of value in working with someone in the here and now to bring some calm and peace and presence, but really knowing that the power and the transformation is going to come by doing the deep work and going back.
Yes, I think you said that really, really beautifully, that last bit, and that in order to do that deep work, there has to be the ability to be present. And I always, I've had people who come to me who are in a state that is, to me, not appropriate for the work I do, because they need that, like that clinic would serve them, right? Or and it's actually nice to have this a resource like that. But it's like, if they can't sit and talk and be okay. I mean, I've had people who lay down during sessions. That's fine too. But it's like, if you can't be in a Zoom meeting, right, then it's like, what I do isn't what's needed yet. First, the system has to be calmed enough. And I think this is a place where people get really tripped up, is trying a modality that just isn't appropriate for where they are at their stage of their healing journey, and then discounting it. Right? Like this was me with breath work. breath work is stupid. It makes my system upset. I will never, do you know what I mean? Versus, no, I first had to find some safety. And I was very much the definition of it's not safe to be safe. And once I did that, now I love breath work, right? But it was just not, I wasn't ready for it yet. And same thing, it sounds like you couldn't have done the deeper work without having this clinic to help you calm your system down. And I want to make a point, though, is that I also see people applying almost like too intensive of treatments, right? It's like almost somebody who going to the equivalent of a clinic like that when they don't need to, when they actually have the presence to do the deeper work, but it's actually used as a form of escapism from doing the deeper work.
That's the second piece of what I would say, what you described around them needing the presence and the capability to do so. The second piece is the willingness, because people are still in that flux or that state of looking at the doctor or clinging to the medication as like the golden fix that's going to come and save them. And that's like the case of just saying, well, look, some people just aren't quite ready yet to do the work. And, you know, I'm not the person that's going to be there kind of dragging them across the line. It's like I'm going to be there coaching them and giving them the tools and the power to be able to transform themselves, because they have everything they need. It's just that they might need to be made aware of certain things that they already have, you know, and those, you know, resources that are already there. And it's just a little bit of guidance to really unlock what they have. And it's not needing to work with this person forever. It's really just giving them the tools and the power and unlocking a few things so that they can go and heal themselves initially and then thrive beyond that. So I think what you said's really, really true. And obviously there are times where people, you know, and they get into, you know, the degree to which I've seen people that are stuck, I haven't seen anything else other than the clinic that will really, you know, get them back in that sort of time frame. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I think this is, again, amazing to know, like, of a resource like this. When I had my concussion, I went to like an intensive treatment it was only a week long, and it was like 5 hours a day though. And I mean, that was such a game changer to just like get this back. It was like, it felt like it just took all the like sludge off to then be able to do a lot of the deeper work. But I'm like, I'm not sure if I would have been able to, in a very similar vein, like be able to do the deeper work without that intensive, like getting my like nervous system reboot. It was at a different
100%.
level, but it was
something.
I'm not even going to go into what it was because I don't know how to describe it well, and whatever. But it's like, if I had a really bad concussion again, I'm like, I would go, because I went to one that was in the Seattle area because that's where I lived. I'm like, I would probably, if a week passed and it wasn't cleared up, I was like, I would probably go and get that intensive treatment again just because it was so successful. And I always will recommend things like that when I know they exist.
Something I'll speak to from that is around the environment factor, and how crucial it is when you are in a stuck environment, being in a place where you're interpreting the same triggers, the same stimulus, the same family members that are pissing you off, whatever the environment is, you know, like that's actually created the conditions for that to exist in the first place. To try and resolve that within the same conditions that it was brought in is a really, really hard thing. And I would say to anyone, like, it is a massive challenge to do so. So the more that you can get yourself out of that environment, the more that you can engage with new people, new practitioners, new information. And in my case, it was an extreme example of moving all the way to the other side of the world into a very different cultural context around a bunch of people who were all on the same mission of healing themselves and all extremely supportive. Like, it's a beautiful environment there where you've got 35, 40 people that were in the worst stages of their life, having amazing transformations, and the belief that stems from that and the positive energy around that is a massive part of it as well, which can't be understated. So when I speak to people about, you know, where they are right now, it's, yeah, we might not be able to create that sort of intensity, but how can we actually change your environment up, get some new people around you who are going to be supportive, get you out of support groups if it's all it is people talking about their symptoms and how stuck they are, and really actually just getting aligned with people who are going to be taking you towards a better version of yourself and a better future.
Yeah, and you touched on something that I will always highlight whenever anyone does, is the support groups that are not actually supportive. I think often people will find themselves in situations where it's like, well, I'm supposed to do this, or this is supposed to help me. And I think deep down, we all know when something is not supportive. Like when you feel worse leaving, or you were actually having a good day and then you feel like crap afterwards, right? That's probably a sign that the environment is not working. And that it can be tough. It can be tough to find a group that is supportive. And I think sometimes people can find it in really unexpected places. And that it doesn't necessarily have to do anything with chronic pain sometimes.
100%. And I really empathize with people who don't have that support in the immediate sphere, because I heard so often about these terrible stories of family members just not believing them, people around them not believing what they had was real because it might not be as visible. There might be some physical manifestation, but, all the jargon around it's all in your head and this type of thing, which, you come to realize with the brain, it's like, well, a lot of, the pain does originate in the brain, but it doesn't mean that it's not real and it's not incredibly painful, and it's not, and it will manifest physically as well. So I do really have empathy, because I was always in the state where I had incredible support around me and understanding, but people with just no idea of what to do or how to do it. And, that for me, it kept me holding on, and it kept a sense of hope. And because I knew that I was supported and I was loved, that kept me pushing through the darker nights that I had, and questioning whether you would make it through. But I think, sometimes it's keeping an open mind. And the thing that I think keeps so many people stuck and kept me stuck for such a long time is skepticism, and allowing your current belief system and your current paradigm and your current understanding to prevent you from seeking something that's outside that sphere. Because on the other side of skepticism, on the other side of, I don't believe this is going to work, was always the biggest point of transformation for me. And it was always where the gold was. And it's just, if you allow yourself to just say, well, what's the worst that can happen from me trying this? Then it opens up so many new possibilities.
Yeah. And what would you say to somebody listening that's like, but I've tried so many things. I have been hopeful. I didn't think it would work. And then it didn't work anyways. Right? I'm curious, one, if you had that experience where before you found the clinic, were you actively seeking out all different kinds of treatments, or were you in the place? Yeah. Okay. So you're nodding your head. Yeah. So go ahead.
I tried quite a few things, and I got caught and I got stuck in the place of thinking, I had quite a high level pain doctor who was considered a relative expert in CRPS in Australia. He was running trials, he was running clinical trials, he was going to get me involved with one of those. All of it was based around trying to find a miracle drug that was going to cure it, which I am highly skeptical of myself using the word. But, I think, I can totally understand that state, and I became a little bit despondent and probably almost gave up in a sense. And I think it was the point that I gave up was when the clinic presented itself. And there's probably a couple of things I'll speak into. I think the point you mentioned around, people looking for things, but then it not being the right time for them, maybe. And just because something didn't work at that time doesn't mean it's not the thing. And it's also the case of looking for the golden cure when it might be the case of needing to stack multiple of these components together. And that, for me, over the course of 6 years, and as I said, in investing over $250,000 in my own health and recovery, my own acquisition of knowledge, different treatments and modalities, all of these things, was a matter of adding to each of them. It wasn't a matter of switching or changing, because different things that worked at different times. And I still draw on many of these, both for my own wellness and staying on a really great path, but also distilling that for people into things that are going to be useful for them. And it's a matter of giving the person the right thing at the right time, as opposed to just the right thing, because there's no golden cure, because they are complex chronic illnesses. However, when you have a broader breadth of knowledge, and what I've managed to accumulate over this period of time, I feel really confident in the set of tools I have available to be able to distill that and provide the right thing at the right time for someone. With that said, there's foundational stuff that I think is useful for everyone, particularly around, I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, but really just going back and clearing out the big emotional blocks, the big emotional traumas, the really foundational stuff that's created this friction in the nervous system where, you know, the amygdala, you know, the pain response center in the brain just becomes hyperactive and hyper focused and hyper vigilant off the back of you know, multiple events stacking on top of each other. And I think without really addressing that as the foundation, then we're kind of playing on the surface of the water a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And with that foundational piece, and I'm like, I don't know if you can actually share. Well, actually, let me go back to something you said first. The stacking of things, I just want to highlight that too, because I also find that sometimes people are gaining knowledge along the way or even gaining tools. Like I'll use like the breath work, for example. It's like I learned the skill of breath work. I learned the like how to meditate, things like that. But it's like I couldn't yet apply it. But once I developed this level of safety in my nervous system where I could do those things, then it kind of dropped in. And I find that a lot with my clients who have probably spent years in like mind body world. So it's like they know all the things. And they're always like, oh my gosh, and I haven't gotten anywhere. I'm like, I promise when things click, it's going to drop. And it's like a massive snowball effect that happens with these people. It just often you're now working through like so many layers of resistance. But once it drops in, things tend to speed up in their outcomes versus people who are like brand new and open. They usually get results so much faster and like right away and have the more like, oh my gosh, in like 3 weeks, everything was better, you know, type of things, because they just had a more open system and they didn't have all these layers of like beliefs and hopelessness and like, oh, this isn't going to work for me and I screw everything up.
That is such a beautiful point. And I'll speak to when I came back from the clinic the first time, and it was a beautiful transformation, and it was rapid transformation for me. And I came back and had everything back. I was like, you know, I can run again. I can go and play golf again. I can, you know, I felt like I'd fallen behind, you know, my peers because I'd been out of life for, you know, a year or two. And I was like, let's go and enroll in a master's degree. I want to be a PT so I can start helping people. But I did it from a place of, I've fallen behind and I need to catch up. And I want to get back in, and I'm feeling like out of the loop, and socially I was out of the loop as well. And I reached, you know, back into these circles, and you know, drinking was my previous mechanism of socializing, and I fell back into these patterns. And then I basically had, you know, no intention of drinking when I got back from the clinic because I was in such a beautiful place, but that sense of not good enough, or the underlying condition of needing to be seen, or, you know, needing to be back and connected with my old spheres, getting my old life back per se, which I don't necessarily like the term of, because we can have a better and more embodied life, you know, afterwards. And that's what I fell into, and basically had a big night drinking and caused myself a relapse. And I fell straight back into that pit, you know, and I fell straight back into that the deepest, darkest, and it was worse than before, because this time there was a whole heap of mental noise and guilt and shame about the fact that I'd blown all this money going to the States, and my parents had to, you know, invest a lot in me to get me over there, and I was just sitting in that state for months and not being able to move myself out of it. And this is where I really started to realize the power of the emotion and the power of the mental noise to actually, you know, really address what was going on, because I felt like I knew intellectually what needed to be done with the tools that I'd learned at the clinic. But this deep sense of shame and guilt and fear that was just overriding my whole system wasn't allowing me to actually do the things that I needed to do, wasn't allowing me to sit up and meditate, you know, wasn't allowing me to just be with my breath. And that's when I realized, you know, we can't deal with the 5% of the conscious brain. We've got to deal with this 95% of the unconscious brain, because that's where it all sits. And unless you kind of dive into that and deal with that and release that burden, the nervous system is just not going to play ball with a recovery.
Yeah, that's exactly what I have found as well. Or it's like, if you get that temporary relief, it like comes back with a vengeance, which is a little bit of what you described. When, if you don't mind me asking, when you were in that like relapse place, was it like the pain that returned, or was it almost more of the emotional state? Okay, so it's the pain.
Yeah, all of the above. So it came back online within a couple of days. It was horrific, like just bang, just straight back on. But this time, yeah, there was that much heavier emotional burden, and then the real suppression of emotion, not wanting to tell my parents what I'd done, not wanting to open up about that, going into my cave, swallowing the emotion, and it's almost like, I think of it like a spring inside of you, and the more you suppress, the more you're compressing this spring, and the more the pressure is building, and how it's going to explode or how it's going to manifest, time will tell, but you don't want to get to that point where it ticks over. I mean, it was already causing me a lot of distress, but it wasn't until I started speaking it out eventually, when I went back to the clinic a second time to basically work through everything. And I was hitting roadblocks around the 6-week mark where I was like, I should be making progress now. This is where I was making progress before. But it was this whole belief system of, I'm not worthy of getting better on the basis of the stupid actions that I've made before.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then the what ifs as well, around what if I relapse again? What will people think of me? And the whole primary concern was around what will people think of me, as opposed to what do I need to do to get better? And that whole complex was really, really a big challenge, until I started to actually speak and just get it out of my system and actually start talking about how I was feeling.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So you went back to the clinic a second time.
And
was it, did the clinic then bring in that component? Is that how you connected those dots, or was that somewhere you connected it separately?
A little bit. That's where I started to connect dots. I think that's probably where I started to get into Joe Dispenza's work. I started to get into reading more mind-body stuff. They did a phenomenal job again of getting me to the point where I was physically great. I'd made quite a bit of progress, but I got back to the clinic. This time it took about 4 months, and I got back to Australia, and pretty soon after it was in the middle of COVID, and I had to go into quarantine for 2 weeks. We were living in Australia, and you got to stay in a hotel with no windows, with, in this box for 2 weeks, having just kind of gotten better. And that's the whole environmental piece of like, it was just the worst thing at the wrong time. And I basically, all of that fear response came back online. What's going to happen if I relapse? I don't have the supports here. I'm a long way from it. What if I stuff it up again myself? What are people going to think of me? And that was probably the most pervasive thought. What are people going to think of me if something happens again, or if I don't actually get myself sorted? And that was the point where, the symptoms started to come back online again when I was back at home. And I was like, I just need to get myself sorted. I can't be relying on other people. It was this realization that, I am the primary agent in my healing. And I saw this great quote, a couple of years ago. It was quite pivotal for me. And it was, no one is coming to save you. Get up.
Yes, I've seen that.
And
yes,
it's direct, and it hit me. It really hit me, and it was like, oh wow. And initially, it's this sense of burden and responsibility, but then you sit with it and you go, then there's a sense of empowerment and possibility, and because I'm responsible and I can actually do something about this. And I was really, really fortunate at that stage to get introduced through a new chiropractor back home where I lived in Newcastle in Australia. And he taught me this technique called Heart Speak. And it's a really simple tool of basically just being able to bypass the conscious brain, go in and just learn to feel feelings again, and really just learn to clear feelings. So clearing the emotional charge and really realizing that emotion is energy in motion, and it's a finite resource. And if you feel it, you heal it, you let it go, and it doesn't actually exist in your sphere anymore. And that was the whole learning and relearning. And, you know, sometimes they say the longest journey is from your head to your heart. And for me, that was a long hike because I'd been so shut off from that part of myself for such a long time that relearning this process of feeling feelings and clearing the emotion and peeling back the layers and releasing the burden and the pressure on that spring that I spoke about before to allow that range to come back. And you know, I remember at one point I'd done these techniques for about 4 or 5 months, and I hadn't cried for the best part of the 4 years at that stage that I'd had CRPS. It just wasn't, you know, I was just that real suppression, stoic male type energy, which was really quite horrific. And I just reached this point where I basically was going through these processes, and I was doing them most days to get myself, and it was really easing the burden on my nervous system. I was noticing massive changes in how I was feeling, both from an emotional perspective, but then seeing it manifest physically because my nervous system was coming back online and functional again. And I basically just broke down and cried, and I cried for the best part of 3 or 4 hours. And it was such this overwhelm, and like I was having almost convulsions with all this energy coming out of my system. And it was just a total sense of relief. And it was amazing to experience, because on the other side of that was just this state of bliss and calm. And it was like my nervous system had just surrendered and actually let go of all the built up tension over all that time. And it was a real realization in that moment that when you suppress emotion, it doesn't disappear. You know, it just builds up. And it's that great Freud quote of suppressed emotion never dies. It gets buried alive, and it comes forth later in uglier ways. And that was the uglier ways was the manifestation of CRPS. But the resolution came through feeling the feelings and moving through it.
Oh, I love that so much. I think this is my favorite part of the work, is the leaning in to the feelings, the allowing them expression. And I want to, since you mentioned that you were more on the stoic side of the not feeling feelings, I'll have a lot of clients who are like, but I cry all the time. But I'm very emotional and my pain hasn't gone away. Like, what the heck? And what I find, and I just want to point this out, is that usually, let's say, you know, they find themselves crying every day. A lot of times they're crying about having intense emotions. So the superficiality of it is coming out. Like, they're upset that they have a feeling. And so they're expressing the feeling about having a feeling. They're never getting to the actual feeling that's looking to be expressed. And so I just want to point that out for someone who's like, because this was me, I'm like, but I'm so emotional. Like, please, like, I cry all the time. It's like, well, I'm crying about something else, so I'm not actually connecting. Like, the feeling has to be embodied. You have to be connected to what's within. And I always give the example of someone with like anger management issues. I'm like, if it was simply like expressing the emotion, then people wouldn't have anger management issues, because they would be expressing their anger all the time. It's not. You have to be connected to what's underneath.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful point. And I think what was really powerful about this technique, it's an emotional stress clearing technique. So when we think about, we identify a symptom or a whether that's a physical symptom or whether it's an emotion in our body that's causing us distress at the time, and we identify what that is. We can do that through muscle testing, or you can really just feel into it as well, to be able to basically treat that as like a stressor. And if, you know, the way you were talking about it, it might be that peripheral mind response to what's actually going on. And we want to just dissolve that which is on the surface so that we can actually get to what's down deeper. And it's a matter of leaning in and basically clearing the stress on that. And then what the process is then pivoting to the opposite positive emotion. So we take ourselves into a state where we are sort of feeling the opposite positive emotion, where we've got that higher view, the higher frequency, the higher energy, to be able to then observe what's going on and take a more bird's eye view of what's happening, and then we can go and look deeper. And I think sometimes that is more of the broad brush approach of just sweeping away the energy that presents itself. The more targeted approach that I take with clients, and the thing that is often more foundational, is dealing with what I describe as these nervous system splinters that have been inserted at different points along the timeline of someone's trajectory, where they didn't seem like much at the time, but over time they become infected and they start to build up this sickness within the nervous system, because it perpetuates, and we start playing out the old patterns that influences our behavior. It starts to form our identity, and before we know it, we don't actually know how we got to where we are. So let's go back in time all the way on the timeline to reach the point where this sort of insertion happened, and that's utilizing a lot of Dr. Espin's techniques that I've learnt and I've been doing and helping facilitate some of his 3-day seminars here in Australia, which are similar to those really transformative meditation retreats, but he uses a whole bunch of different modalities, and I've learned his method to be able to apply it in an individual context now for people to take them back to those, the greatest moment of fear. What is your greatest fear? What is that greatest moment of guilt that you're holding on to? And where did that come up? And so often it's not something that the thing that people would consciously come to mind, because once you drop them into a meditative state and you take them through that process, it might be something that's quite trivial. It might be something that, but the subconscious will throw that up and it will say, here it is. And you're really taking that splinter out and removing the destabilization in the nervous system in a way that you can see phenomenal transformations happening in a really, really short space of time. In that room where we've got 250 people, and we see people having what would be perceived as spontaneous remissions from physical illness and physical healings, because the nervous system just goes, oh, I don't have to stress anymore. We don't. We've reframed that memory that's been causing so much distress, and it's phenomenal to see and be able to be in the presence and experience that and facilitate that. Like, just brings me so much joy.
Oh, that is amazing. And I love that metaphor of the splinter. That's like such a perfect way to put it. And I also just love that you touch on sometimes what comes up can feel so trivial. I find often clients who have been to a lot of therapy are more challenging to work with, because it's when you try to dive into anything, their conscious brain is well, it's because of abandonment issues. And it's no, and when you really drop in and it's oh, it's because my sister broke my crayon when I was 3. And it's yes. Right. And it's the response, the you just see, you can tell when someone's up in their brain versus actually connected to what their nervous system is holding on to. And it's we get to make room for it all, and how the nervous system interpreted a situation, even if it feels trivial to you. It wasn't trivial to your nervous system, and it wasn't trivial to your 3-year-old self.
Yeah. And I think it's useful to sort of understand how basically the brain, when it interprets a memory, is seeing it in a binary sense, where is this a positive experience? Is this a negative experience? And it takes that file and it stores it at the time, and it puts it into your memory bank in such a way that it is defined as positive or negative. And sometimes even having a really strong positive charge on something isn't a very beneficial thing as well, because you have a certain desire or a certain craving for that to be maintained. So when we talk about going through and dealing with timeline therapy and reprocessing memory, it's around neutralizing that. So you've still got the memory, and it's still a beautiful memory, but it's not driving your behavior from a subconscious perspective. And there's none of that imbalance in your life that comes off the back of having those traumatic events.
Yeah. I want to be respectful of your time. Are you good to go a little longer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all good.
So, if you don't mind, I want to go back to what you were talking about. I think it was the heart speak, because you said something interesting that I haven't heard, of the going to the opposite emotion. Would you be willing to take an example through that process?
I can run a process on you if you'd like. It would only take 5 minutes.
Sure.
So basically, if we think about and what I just spoke about, the memory piece where we throw up a memory and that sort of comes out, and we're identifying that it's got a negative charge on it. And with hard speak, we're not thinking about the story. We're just thinking purely about what the emotion is. So we're not needing to attach a story to it. But when that emotion comes up, that emotion's likely attached to a memory somewhere in the nervous system. So when we feel into it and we reduce the intensity of the emotion that's present, then we can sort of let go and allow that just to be there. And what we're doing is then inserting a new frame or a new stimulus to that associated memory, for want of a better term, in the form of a positive emotion that almost replaces and updates the software and I suppose neutralizes that charge in a sense, if that makes sense, the way I've described it. Yeah. So yeah, sure. So we'll do it's sort of like a 5-minute closed eye process, and this would just be an example of one peeling away one layer. Yeah. So if you close your eyes, just relax into your chair and taking deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose, just dropping your awareness down into your chest on the exhale. All right, and just keep breathing. And what we're looking for is feeling of anger. It was something that recently just really ticked you off, really stirred up that feeling of anger. Just go to that. Start feeling it. And make the facial expression of anger as well. Really clench your fists as well. Embody that anger in your posture. Tense up your arms. Make the fists angry facial expression and really feel into it. Intensify it as much as you can. Now let go of the story and just focus on where that anger is in your body. Really stir it as much as you can. Focus purely on the sensation. So out of 10, how intense is that right now?
Just 6.
Cool. Just stay with it. Keep intensifying it. As angry as you can. Real rage. Keep stirring it up. Come back to your breath and just breathe into that feeling in your body. Full presence with the emotion, letting go of the story. And that energy should start to dissipate if you just stay with it. Out of 10, where are you now?
3.
Nice. Stay with it. Feel all of the 3. Stay super present. Keep feeling that 3, the rest of that 3. Feel it so you never have to feel it again. Breathing into it. Keep going. Every last bit of that anger. Or is it right now?
Like a 1,
Yeah.
0.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now just let go and relax. You can put your palms facing upward on your knees, keeping your eyes closed, chin back, chest up, and just letting go and allowing, surrendering. And now what you're going to feel is sense of joy pouring in through the top of your head, expanding you. All that joy. Bring a big smile to your face. Big, expansive smile as you feel so much joy pouring through. The strongest joy you could imagine. Stay with it. Drink it all in. Stay with it one more moment. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. How you feeling?
That's nice. Yeah. I like that. I like the bringing in the joy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I like it for a few reasons. It's such a beautiful tool to use in the moment when you feel like you get I don't quite like the word trigger, when challenging emotions when challenging emotions do surface, to just take 5. All you need to do is take 5 and you just go and you feel that emotion and you transmute it to the opposite positive, and something that might have impacted you for the day or a couple of days, or might be a little spouse conflict that's going to perpetuate for a week. But if you just go through, just take a moment, you clear the emotion and really transform your state. It's a powerful thing. Certainly for those moments where you're really suffering and you're really in the intense emotion, I found it just gave me that spaciousness. And that's at the start of it. And then obviously, as I mentioned, once you get into the deeper layers, it can be super transformative as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really beautiful process. I take, I have a lot of the feeling it, and then I often bring people to like a sense of like safety and resourcing, but I haven't really taken it to that next level. So thank you for that. It's like really beautiful. I love learning new things.
I'm so glad. So do I. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty we could learn off each other. It's good.
I know. Well, thank you so much for this, and thank you for providing everyone a little taste of what you do. Hopefully everyone can even take themselves through that as they're listening, and as much as you feel like comfortable to do something like that. And so where can people find more about you, what you do, work with you? And you mentioned some resources you have for people too.
Yeah, for sure. So they can find me on Instagram predominantly. So my handle is Harry, so HARRY MACANSH. So Macansh is my surname. That's going to be the best place to find me. I've collated a free resource for people to get. So and that will basically summarize the methodology I use, or the framework that I use when I'm working with clients. So that's how to calm your chronic pain without more medication, even if you've been stuck for years. So that is the thesis based off my own experience and being able to implement that with clients as well. So yeah, if they reach out via Instagram, if they just send me a DM with the word or the name Andrea, then I'll pass along that free resource, and they can have a look and potentially chat more.
Awesome. That sounds great. Yeah, you have some amazing reels on there. So go ahead and check out his Instagram. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom, your story. I think it is so helpful for us to hear other people's stories and to see where you've taken it. It's amazing. It's amazing for you sharing all this wisdom and knowledge that you've gained through your own experience. So thank you for what you do.
I appreciate it so much. Yeah. And as I mentioned to you, seeing what you're doing on your socials and the impact you're having is inspirational. So I think it's a very collaborative industry that we're in, which is really a beautiful place to be. So thanks so much for the opportunity. And it's been, a real pleasure to be able to share some insights with people.
Absolutely. Thank you.